Welcome to the Explainer. Today, we're taking the ultimate bird's eye view, really untangling the massive and honestly pretty chaotic geopolitical web of 2026. We're going to dive deep into exactly how global power is fundamentally shifting right beneath our feet. And look, this matters to you directly. These tectonic shifts, they're about to reshape the prices of your groceries, the technology in your pocket, and the fundamental security of our borders. We've pulled together risk briefs, defense forum reports, and scholarly journals to give you the clear, jargon-free aha moments you need to actually make sense of it all. You know, for decades, the post-Cold War era felt like it was drawn in permanent ink, right? It was a unipolar world, pretty much led by Western institutions. But as this quote perfectly captures, that era is totally over. The map is literally being erased and redrawn in real time. We are witnessing a massive structural realignment where everything, from the microchips inside your smartphone all the way up to upcoming moon landings, is suddenly and deeply connected.
All right, here's our roadmap for today. First up, the money and the map. Second, the muscle. And finally, the frontier and the future. So, jumping right in. Section 1, the money and the map. BRICS Plus and economic autonomy. You really can't understand the military or security shifts happening today without first understanding that the global economic center of gravity is moving. Think about the original BRICS bloc: Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa. Well, it's expanded into BRICS Plus, bringing in nations like Egypt, Ethiopia, Saudi Arabia, the UAE, and potentially even Indonesia very soon. This coalition now accounts for over half of the entire global population. That is a staggering demographic shift, and it's actively reshaping Western influence as we speak. So experts like to call this expansion a counter-hegemonic project. Sounds super academic, right? But in plain English, a hegemony is just a system where one power dictates the rules of the game. For a long time, the US and Europe set those terms. This BRICS Plus expansion basically represents the Global South saying, yeah, no thanks, we're going to make our own rules. They're charting a totally independent path for economic autonomy and building an alternative system for global trade, finance, and security from the ground up. And we're seeing this play out in practice right now with de-dollarization. Traditionally, let's say Brazil wants to buy solar panels from China. That transaction is priced in US dollars and routed through Western systems like SWIFT. That gives the US massive visibility and leverage. They could effectively sanction you and just shut off your financial water. But with bilateral swaps, Brazil and China trade the real for the yuan directly. By leveraging alternative digital payment networks and central bank digital currencies, they are actively weakening the current international financial system and totally neutralizing Western sanction leverage. Now, this financial independence is paired with physical independence. Real-world logistics infrastructure is completely shaping new global alliances. Get this, China now outpaces US trade in both Latin America and Africa. India is out there building massive port projects in Africa to secure its own logistics. And the Global South is actively layering soft power right on top of this. Brazil is leaning heavily into its agricultural might and Portuguese-speaking connections to really define South America's position in this new landscape, while India uses IT and Bollywood. The crazy part? They aren't building some anti-US military coalition. They're securing their geopolitical independence through balance sheets and supply chains. Moving on to Section 2, the muscle, peak volatility and redefining defense. Because look, the line between trade and geopolitics, it's pretty much vanished. When nations create alternative financial and logistical systems, it naturally bleeds into security alignments. Just looking objectively at the data here, a 2026 CSIS survey asked 79 top foreign policy experts about US-China relations. The result? A literal perfect three-way split. 33.3% expect cooperation, 33.3% expect antagonism, and 33.3% expect no change. When the world's top analysts are divided into exact thirds like this, it means our global system has reached peak volatility. It could tip in any direction based on just a single incident. And we're seeing exactly how terrifying that unpredictability is right now. Take the Takaichi incident. Japanese Prime Minister Saiji Takaichi made some statements regarding the defense of Taiwan. China interpreted these as highly provocative. The result? A severe diplomatic row where Chinese fighter jets actually locked their targeting radars onto Japanese aircraft. Just to be clear, when you lock radar, you are literally a button press away from launching a missile.
Because of this intense US-China instability, along with the ongoing nuclear threat from North Korea, Japan has realized they can no longer just hide under the old US security umbrella. $66.5 billion, that is Japan's record defense budget for 2026. And they aren't just throwing money at the problem, they are completely rewriting their defense posture from the ground up.
Think about this. For 80 years post-World War II, Japan's global identity was defined by pacifism and alliance dependency. But now, much like Europe's recent awakening to pursue strategic sovereignty, Japan is shifting toward operational parity. They intend to fight alongside the US as an equal partner, stepping up as a regional force multiplier to create a sort of distributed network of deterrence.
In practice, this means they've established a joint operations command with the US. They're procuring 400 Tomahawk missiles, leaning heavily into the Quad Alliance, and even negotiating to join NATO's Defense Innovation Accelerator, DIANA. But the absolute game changer happened in 2026, when Japan overhauled its 80-year-old defense export regulations so they can actually sell warships and missiles to allies. I mean, if Japan sells advanced naval tech to the Philippines, it massively complicates the calculus for any adversary. They're brilliantly using industrial capacity as a strategic weapon. While Japan preps for a high-tech naval environment, let's pivot across the globe to Europe. The EU is undergoing its own massive defense awakening, driven entirely by the attritional warfare in Ukraine. The Spanish Ministry of Defense describes this mature structural conflict as systemic erosion. Basically, the era of rapid, sweeping tank maneuvers, that's largely dead. It's been replaced by a 5 to 20 kilometer deep no man's land that is entirely saturated by drones.
The entire math of modern warfare has completely flipped. Think about it. Firing a $2 million interceptor missile at a $200 off-the-shelf commercial drone means you might win that specific battle, sure, but you are going to go bankrupt way before the enemy runs out of drones. Survival today requires massive production capacity and incredibly cheap, redundant systems. This grim realization has absolutely shocked the European Union into action. They've launched the Rearm Europe plan, forming capability coalitions focused on air defense, drones, and cyber. Crucially, they're mapping industrial capacity for 40% joint procurement by 2027 to deliberately move away from dependency on American infrastructure. Europe realizes that if the political winds shift in Washington, they could be left completely stranded. So they're building a truly sovereign defense industrial base. But they aren't just building weapons, they're structurally integrating Ukraine into their system. Long before any formal military induction, the EU is reinforcing its borders with institutional infrastructure. They've already brought Ukraine to their roam-like-at-home mobile data area, and they are preparing them to join the single European payments area. They are systematically cutting the friction of money transfers and data to basically lock their alliances in place. Which brings us to Section 3, the frontier and the future, astropolitics and corporate superpowers. Because this intense terrestrial race for sovereign defense and technological supremacy, it doesn't stop at the atmosphere. It is literally extending into orbit. Welcome to the era of astropolitics. Astropolitics mirrors terrestrial geopolitics perfectly. You have the US leading the Artemis Accords for a 2028 crewed landing, while China counters with the ILRS lunar base. But the real story here? The unaligned nations. Countries like Turkey, Thailand, and Senegal are totally playing both sides. Get this, Turkey, an Artemis member, is actually sending AI rovers on China's upcoming Chang'e 8 mission. Space agreements are becoming the absolute new frontier for international alliance formation, with nations just seeking access to logistics infrastructure regardless of who built it. And when we factor in the private sector, the paradigm shifts entirely. In 2025, SpaceX accounted for 165 out of the 306 global orbital launches. That is roughly one launch every 28 hours. Private technology companies have basically become independent geopolitical actors. A single private company controls more than half of the world's access to orbit, dropping launch costs by 90% and inventing a brand new orbital economy. It's really doing for space what the shipping container did for global trade here on Earth. Which leads us to a crucial concept in space governance: facts on the regolith. The regolith is the lunar soil, and the idea is super simple. Whoever arrives first and builds the infrastructure makes the rules. The law follows the logistics. When private corporations control massive swaths of access to orbit, and nations are frantically racing to draw borders in the lunar dust, traditional national sovereignty gets very, very complicated. We've covered incredible ground today, haven't we? From BRICS Plus expanding and securing trade routes away from Western influence, to Japan and Europe radically redefining their own sovereign defense, all the way to the astropolitical race for the moon. But it all leaves us with this final, genuinely provocative thought. If private companies are providing the fundamental logistics of space, and if modern wars are fought with mass-produced, off-the-shelf commercial drones, we have to reconsider power itself. Will the geopolitical superpowers of the late 21st century be traditional nation-states, or will they be independent tech corporations operating their own sovereign infrastructure? That is the question you need to be asking. Thanks so much for joining us for this explainer. Keep your eyes on the shifting map, and we'll see you next time.